Ethan Cross woke up to the sound of air humming through metal walls. His head was heavy, his throat dry, and his vision blurred like a fogged window. When he finally focused, he saw that he was inside a silver room, glowing faintly blue. The walls looked alive, moving slightly, breathing like some giant creature. He touched the floor, and it pulsed under his fingers, sending a chill through his spine. He wasn't on his ship anymore, and he wasn't anywhere near Earth. Memories came back in flashes. His ship, the Ardent Star, patrolling near the Red Nebula. A strange signal had appeared on their scanners, a pattern that seemed almost like a voice calling for help. Then the flash, the explosion, and the darkness. Now he was here. Locked inside what looked like an alien cell, the door hissed open. Smooth and silent, Ethan tensed, ready for anything. But what stepped inside wasn't what he expected. It was her. Tall, silver-skinned, her eyes glowing like liquid mercury. She wore armor that looked grown, not built, as if it had formed around her body like crystal vines. Her presence was calm, yet every movement carried power. She looked at him as one might look at a wild animal trapped in a cage. Then she spoke, her voice deep and cold, echoing across the room. "You're not leaving until I'm satisfied." "Human," Ethan blinked, his mind racing. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, his voice rough, but she didn't answer, only tilted her head slightly, studying him. Her eyes seemed to see through him, past his skin, his bones, even his fear. Finally, she said, "You were found trespassing in restricted space. Near our sacred orbit, you carry guilt, human. And guilt feeds the heart of this station." Ethan frowned. "Guilt? I didn't do anything." But his voice trembled because deep down, he wasn't sure that was true. He had made choices in his missions, choices that had cost lives. She stepped closer, and he could see faint lines of light moving across her skin. "The station knows truth from lies," she said quietly. "You will prove your innocence and or be consumed by it." The wall shifted, opening a path behind her. She turned and gestured for him to follow. Ethan hesitated, then stepped forward. The corridor was filled with veins of blue light, running like rivers beneath transparent glass. Strange symbols moved across the walls, not written, but alive like energy flowing through veins. He asked, "Who are you?" She replied without looking back, "I am Warden Sale of the Voran Order, keeper of this living prison." The words sent a chill through him. A living prison, the idea itself was madness, yet as he walked deeper, he could feel the walls reacting to his presence, breathing faster, glowing brighter. The station was aware of him, watching him. When they reached a circular chamber, Sael stopped. In the center stood a tall, crystal-like pillar with streams of light swirling inside. She pointed toward it. "Step forward, human. The pillar will read your essence." Ethan shook his head. "I don't even know what's happening." Her expression didn't change, but her tone sharpened. "You will know soon enough," she said. "Refuse, and the station will decide for you." He took a step forward, his boots clanging softly against the metal floor. As his hand touched the pillar, a surge of warmth rushed through his arm. He gasped as images exploded in his mind, his ship crew laughing before the mission, the explosion that took them, his desperate call for help, and his silence when he realized he had caused it by ignoring a warning. The warden watched him silently. When the light faded, Ethan fell to his knees, his breath shaking. What was that?" he whispered. She replied, "Your truth, human. This station feeds on guilt and regret, emotions that give it strength." He stared at her, horrified. "You're feeding it with pain," he said. "Yes," she said calmly, "and your pain burns brighter than most." Ethan felt anger rise in him, but also confusion. Why was she doing this? Why him? He stood and looked at her straight in the eyes. "What do you want from me?" Her eyes narrowed and her voice dropped to a low hum. "I want to understand why a species that can destroy worlds still feels guilt. I want to know if your kind deserves to exist." The silence that followed felt endless. Then the walls around them pulsed once, like a heartbeat. The light flickered, casting her face in shifting shadows. "Your trials begin now, human," she said, stepping back toward the doorway. Ethan took a breath, his fists tightening. "Wait," he called out. "You said you won't let me go until you're satisfied, but what will satisfy you?" She paused, looking over her shoulder, her silver eyes catching the light. "Truth," she said softly, "and perhaps something more." The door sealed behind her, leaving Ethan alone in the humming blue light. He looked at the pillar, then at his reflection in its surface. He didn't know what this place wanted, or what the Warden truly sought, but one thing was clear. He was not leaving until he faced everything he had buried deep inside. The silence in the chamber stretched for hours, or maybe it was only minutes. Ethan couldn't tell anymore. Because time in this place felt twisted, the light in the walls dimmed and brightened like slow breathing. He had tried to sleep, but the air itself hummed with life, keeping him awake. Then the door slid open again, and the Warden stepped inside, her expression unreadable. "The station is ready," she said, her voice calm but carrying a strange weight. "Ready for what?" Ethan asked, standing slowly, his muscles aching from the cold metal floor. "For your first trial," she answered, turning away as if expecting him to follow without question. He followed her through the long corridor, each step echoing softly. The walls began to glow with moving shapes, faces, fragments of moments, bits of memory that weren't his. It felt like walking through the mind of something alive and ancient. The station itself was watching him, learning him, and whispering in sounds too faint to understand. Finally, they reached a vast chamber, circular and dark, with a single platform at the center. Suspended above it was a massive machine, shaped like a spinning ring of silver light. It pulsed slowly, almost like a heartbeat. "This is the memory core," the Warden said. "It reads your life, your choices, your guilt. It will show you what you have hidden from yourself." Ethan's throat tightened. "I don't need to see my memories. They're already bad enough." The Warden turned her head slightly, her silver eyes glowing brighter. "That is not your decision, human," she said. "The core decides what you must face." Two mechanical arms extended from the ceiling, their ends shaped like curved bands of energy. They attached to the sides of his head gently, but the touch sent a current through him. Before he could speak, the world around him dissolved. He stood in a desert, but not any desert he knew. The sand was red like rust, the sky swirling with colors that bled into one another. He heard the voice of his old commander, shouting orders through static. It was a memory, but he was living it again. The mission on Vega 9, the trade colony where he had disobeyed a direct order to save time. His decision had caused a reactor meltdown, destroying the colony's oxygen domes. Hundreds had died. He tried to scream that it wasn't his fault, that the system had failed, but his voice vanished in the wind. The faces of those lost appeared in the sand, their mouths moving silently, their eyes accusing him. He dropped to his knees, clutching his head. "Stop it," he shouted, but the desert didn't stop. The Warden's voice came from the air itself, calm and unbroken. "Do you feel it, human?" "The guilt your mind carries," Ethan gasped. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "But it happened," her voice replied. "Your kind always says that, and yet the stars burned because of you." The scene changed, and he was now inside his ship's control room. His younger self sat in the captain's chair, arguing with the crew, one of them, his friend. Rena warned him not to activate the jump engines too close to the nebula. He ignored her, confident and proud. A moment later, the explosion came again, the same flash that had brought him here. He watched her die again, saw her hand reach for him through the fire, and all he could do was watch. He screamed in fury, swinging his fist at the hologram of his younger self. The image shattered like glass, scattering into tiny blue sparks. The machine began to hum louder, feeding on his emotions. The lights grew brighter until the whole chamber glowed white. The Warden stood behind a glass barrier, observing silently. Her expression wasn't cruel, but filled with something close to sorrow. The alien station fed on guilt, but she seemed to feed on understanding. She watched him not as a prisoner, but as a puzzle she couldn't solve. When the machine finally powered down, Ethan collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. His hands trembled as he looked up at her. "Why are you doing this to me?" he said, voice shaking. "To see if your soul still remembers what mercy feels like," she answered quietly. He frowned, confused. "Mercy?" "Yes," she said, "the galaxy has long forgotten it. Perhaps humans still carry the spark." She walked toward him slowly, the glow of the room reflecting in her eyes. "For every memory you face, the station feeds, but it also learns. If your heart hardens, it will consume you. If it softens, it may set you free." Ethan laughed bitterly. "Freedom doesn't exist here." The Warden stopped in front of him, lowering her head slightly. "Then make it exist," she said softly. "The core has only shown you the first layer. What you regret next, it will show what you fear." Her words struck him like ice. He looked at the fading light of the memory core, still glowing faintly with his pain. He didn't know how much more of this he could survive, but deep inside, he also felt something else. A strange pull toward the Warden. She was cold, but her eyes sometimes flickered with warmth, like someone who didn't want to be doing what she must. As they walked back to the corridor, the walls pulsing gently around them, Ethan whispered to himself, "If this is just the beginning, what comes next?" The station hummed in response, almost as if it had heard him, and far ahead, in the endless maze of corridors, something ancient awakened, waiting for the second trial to begin. Hours passed after the trial, or maybe days. Ethan couldn't tell anymore. In the alien station, time didn't move like it did for humans. There were no clocks, no sunrise, no sleep, only the steady heartbeat of the walls and the endless hum of energy. He sat in the corner of his cell, staring at his reflection in the metal floor. He looked like a ghost, and tired eyes, cracked lips, and a mind full of noise. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Rena's face in the flames, reaching for him again. The memory core had torn open wounds he thought were long buried, and now he couldn't stop feeling the guilt it left behind. The door to his cell opened suddenly, flooding the room with a faint blue light. Warden Sale stepped in, her steps light and silent. Her silver eyes watched him for a long moment, but she said nothing. Ethan spoke first, his voice low. "What do you want now? Another memory? Another punishment?" She didn't respond right away. Instead, she walked closer and knelt in front of him. For the first time, her tone softened. "You survived the first trial, human. Most minds break after the memory core." Ethan gave a weak laugh. "Guess I'm just stubborn, or guilty," she replied quietly, and then stood up again. "Come with me," she said. "There is something you must see." Ethan followed her down a long, twisting passage lit by pale threads of light. This time the air was cooler, filled with a strange vibration that hummed in his bones. They entered a large chamber, not like the others. This one was dark and quiet. In the center floated a sphere of light, small but bright, pulsing slowly like a heart. "The core of the station," Sale said softly. "The living mind that sustains this place." Ethan stared at it, fascinated and uneasy. "It looks alive," he whispered. "It is alive," she replied. "But it is dying." That word hit him. He turned toward her. "Dying? How can a machine die?" She looked at the glowing sphere, her expression distant. "It was not built," she said. "It was born." Ethan frowned. "Born? The Warden do not build our technology," she explained. "We grow it. The station is a living organism. And it feeds on emotion, guilt, sorrow, memory, the energy of the mind." Ethan shivered, remembering the memory core. "So that's why you're doing this to me," he said, "to feed it." She shook her head slowly. "Not just to feed it, to heal it." For the first time, Ethan saw something different in her eyes, something human. A quiet sadness, she continued. "The core's balance was broken long ago. When humans destroyed the sacred orbit near our sun, your kind's warships drained the emotional field that once nourished it. Now it starves and the Warden are dying with it." Ethan took a step closer, his voice heavy. "And you think my guilt can fix that?" Sale's gaze met his. "Perhaps human emotions are volatile, strong, unpredictable and alive. If the core can taste true remorse, maybe it will stabilize." Ethan looked at her, anger and confusion mixing in his chest. "So you're using me like a battery," he said. "A living fuel source." Sale's voice stayed calm. "I'm giving you purpose." "Human," he clenched his fists. "You call this purpose? Making me relive everything I hate about myself?" Her silver eyes flashed brighter for a moment. "You think I enjoy this?" she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The station was my creation, my child, and now I am forced to feed it with suffering just to keep it alive." The silence that followed was deep. Ethan had never heard her speak like that before. Not like a warden, but like someone broken. He asked quietly, "Then why not stop it?" She looked at the sphere again, her voice low. "Because if I stop, it dies, and with it, everything I was sworn to protect?" Ethan felt something shift inside him, a small crack in his anger. Maybe she wasn't a monster after all. Maybe she was trapped just like him. Then the sphere flared suddenly, sending a shockwave through the room. Sale staggered, clutching her head, her skin glowing brighter as if the station was draining her energy. Ethan rushed forward instinctively, catching her before she fell. Her body was cold, but her pulse was strong. She opened her eyes slowly, and for a brief second he saw fear, and real, human-like fear, in her gaze. "It's getting worse," she whispered. "The core is consuming everything if it collapses. This place will take us both." Ethan helped her stand. "Then shut it down." She shook her head weakly. "I can't. The core and I are connected. If it dies, I die with it." Ethan stared at her, his heart pounding. "So that's your secret," he said. "You're not just its warden, you're part of it." She looked up at him slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am its heart." The words hung between them like the silence before a storm. Ethan didn't know what to say. The alien he thought was his captor was actually the prisoner of her own creation. And maybe, just maybe, they needed each other to survive. The lights of the chamber dimmed, and the heartbeat of the station slowed. Somewhere deep within the walls, the core murmured in a faint, echoing sound like a voice calling both their names. Sale turned toward the noise, her expression filled with both dread and longing. "The next trial will begin soon," she whispered. "And this time it will test more than your guilt. Human, it will test your fear." Ethan felt the ground tremble beneath his feet. The walls pulsed, the air thickened, and the sphere of light above them flickered weakly. He didn't know what the next trial would bring. But one thing was certain. The warden was no longer just his enemy. She was the key to the truth behind this living nightmare. The next cycle began with silence, not the usual hum of the station. Not the steady heartbeat in the walls, just deep, endless quiet. Ethan woke to find the lights dim and flickering. Like the place was holding its breath, he stood, feeling a strange unease crawling up his spine. Something had changed. He could feel it in the air, heavy and electric. Then the door to his chamber slid open, and Warden Sale stepped through, her movements slower, her eyes faintly duller than before. The station was draining her, just like it drained everything else. "You said the core is dying," Ethan said, his voice echoing softly. "What happens when it finally dies?" She looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Then everything connected to it ends, including me, including this place." He frowned. "So why keep me alive? If the station's already failing, what do you want from me now?" Her lips curved into a faint, unreadable smile. "I want to see if a human heart can be trusted." Before he could speak, she turned and motioned for him to follow. He hesitated, then stepped after her into the long corridor, glowing faint silver. The walls no longer pulsed smoothly. They flickered, showing veins of dark matter like cracks beneath glass. They reached a new chamber, circular, filled with floating rings of light, and a single table made of transparent crystal in the center. "What is this place?" Ethan asked, looking around. "This," she said softly, "is where the experiment of trust begins." Sale walked to the table and pressed her hand to its surface. The crystal flared, and two metal cuffs rose from it. Shaped like bracelets of liquid light, Ethan took a step back. "No. No more of your machines." But her expression was calm, almost gentle. "These are not weapons. They are links," she said. "If we are to save the core, we must share thoughts and emotions directly, without lies." He stared at her in disbelief. "You mean connect our minds?" She nodded. "Only for a short time, enough for the station to read our bond. Enough for it to believe we trust each other." Ethan laughed bitterly. "You kidnapped me, tortured me with memories, and now you want me to trust you?" Saya looked at him quietly, her eyes softening. "And yet, you still saved me when the core nearly consumed me." Her voice was calm, but her words struck deep. He looked away, his jaw tightening. "That was instinct. Perhaps," she said. "Or perhaps it was something more," he sighed. Walking toward the table. "What happens if this link fails?" he asked. Sale's tone turned solemn. "Then the core will see us as enemies, and it will consume us both." He swallowed hard. "Great, no pressure." Still, he placed his hand on one of the glowing cuffs. Sael mirrored his action, and the cuffs wrapped around their wrists like molten silver. A sudden warmth spread through Ethan's arm, not pain, but a deep vibration. Then he heard her voice inside his head, not through sound but through thought. "Can you hear me, human?" Ethan's eyes widened. "You're in my head," he said aloud. "And you in mine," her voice replied, calm but distant. The sensation was strange. Her emotions brushed against his mind like ripples in water. He felt cold logic, deep sorrow, and something else hidden beneath, loneliness. He hadn't expected that, And in return he knew she could sense his own feelings. The guilt, the fear, the flicker of curiosity that refused to die. Their shared connection made the chamber glow brighter. The air humming with new energy, the station seemed to respond, its walls vibrating like it was awakening. Sale gasped quietly, her hand trembling. "The core feels it," she whispered. "It's recognizing us as one mind." But before Ethan could speak, the connection deepened suddenly and he was pulled into her memories. He saw flashes. A young Sale standing before a council of glowing figures pledging to protect the living station. He saw her people building their great structures out of light and thought. And he saw the day it all ended. Human warships tearing through the sky, their weapons burning everything in their path. He felt her pain, her helplessness, her hatred. He stumbled back, clutching his head. "I didn't do that," he shouted. Her voice echoed in his mind. "No, but your kind did." The energy between them pulsed violently. Shaking the chamber, the cuffs glowed hotter, burning with unstable light. Ethan forced himself to focus, remembering her words, remembering that if their bond broke, they would die. He took a deep breath and reached out mentally, trying to show her what he felt. Not guilt, but understanding. Images from his own life flashed through their shared link. His crew laughing before their mission. Rena's smile, the explosion, the regret that never left him. Sale watched it all, her expression softening, the light in her eyes flickering like dawn breaking after a storm. The violent pulse began to fade, replaced by a steady rhythm. The walls of the chamber glowed warmly. "The core is stabilizing," she whispered, almost in awe. Ethan could feel it too. The energy now felt alive, like it was breathing with them. When the cuffs finally released, he stumbled back, gasping. Sale held onto the table, her skin shimmering faintly with light. She looked at him with quiet wonder. "You did it," he shook his head. "We did it," for a long moment. They stood in silence, both breathing heavily, both changed in ways they couldn't yet understand. The station had felt their connection. It had tasted something it hadn't known before. Not guilt, not fear, but trust. As they left the chamber, the walls glowed softly around them, as if the station itself was watching with new curiosity. Sale glanced at Ethan, her voice low but steady. "Perhaps the core was right to choose you." Ethan frowned slightly. "Choose me? What do you mean by that?" She didn't answer, only gave him a small, unreadable smile before walking ahead, but in her silence, one truth became clear: this experiment wasn't over. It was only the beginning of something neither of them could control. The station was no longer silent. For the first time since Ethan's arrival, he could hear movement, distant footsteps, metallic echoes, and the low rumble of machines waking from sleep. Something was changing deep inside the living walls. He could feel it, a tension, a heartbeat out of rhythm, a whisper that didn't belong. Ethan walked beside Warden Sale through the corridor, the faint blue lights pulsing like veins beneath their feet. The connection they had shared still lingered in his mind. He could almost sense her thoughts sometimes, faint feelings brushing against his own. She had let him see her memories, her pain, and now a strange understanding existed between them. But trust, real trust, was still fragile. Sale stopped suddenly, her head turning toward the ceiling as if listening to a distant sound. "What is it?" Ethan asked quietly. She didn't answer right away, her silver eyes narrowing. Finally, she whispered, "They're here." "Who's here?" "The Sentinels," she said, her voice sharp now. "Guards of the core. They believe I've betrayed our purpose by linking with you." Before Ethan could react, the corridor lights turned red. A deep alarm echoed through the station, not mechanical, but alive like a creature screaming. The walls began to tremble, and shapes formed from the shadows ahead. Tall figures made of metal and light stepped forward, their armor shifting like liquid glass. Their faces were blank, smooth masks with glowing slits for eyes. The Sentinels moved in silence, but their presence radiated violence. "Warden Sale!" a voice boomed from nowhere. Cold and sharp. "You have broken the law of purity. You linked your mind with a human, a defiler of our kind." Sale lifted her chin, her tone steady. "I did what was necessary to save the core," the voice hissed. "By contaminating it with human thought, you have doomed us all." Ethan stepped forward, his fists clenched. "Hey, maybe if you stopped trying to kill each other, your world wouldn't be dying." The Sentinels turned their heads toward him, and the air grew heavier. Sale moved fast, pulling him behind her. "Stay back," she ordered, her voice suddenly commanding. Energy flared around her hands, forming a shield of light that shimmered like glass underwater. The sentinels attacked. Beams of burning light shot through the air. The corridor shook as walls twisted and screamed. Sale countered, sending arcs of energy crashing into them. Ethan ducked behind a column, the heat washing over him. The battle was like nothing he had ever seen. Alien against alien. Each movement fluid, elegant, and deadly. Sale fought with precision and fury, but she was outnumbered. Ethan's engineer instincts kicked in. He looked around for anything he could use. The walls were alive. Connected to the core, he spotted a control panel embedded in the wall. Pulsing faintly without thinking, he rushed toward it, pulling open a section of the living metal. Inside, tendrils of glowing fiber pulsed like nerves. He remembered what Sael had told him. The station reacted to emotion. So he focused, pressing his hand against the fibers, thinking of one thing, protection. The wall shuddered, then came alive. Tendrils shot outward, forming a barrier between Sael and the attackers. The sentinels stumbled back in surprise. Sael turned her head, eyes wide with disbelief. "You're controlling it," she said softly. Ethan grinned faintly. "Guess it likes me now." But before either could say more, another explosion tore through the corridor. The sentinels regrouped, their leader stepping forward. "This ends now," it hissed, raising its weapon. Ethan saw the light building. He didn't think. He just moved. He tackled Sael out of the way as the beam struck the ground. The blast sent them both flying, the shockwave rolling down the corridor. When the light faded, Ethan groaned and pushed himself up. The sentinels were retreating, their leader glaring at Sael before vanishing into the red mist. "This isn't over," its voice echoed. "The council will know of your betrayal." Sael stood slowly, her body glowing faintly where the blast had hit her. Her armor cracked, but her gaze stayed steady. Ethan looked around, catching his breath. "They'll be back, won't they?" "Yes," she said, her tone grim. "And next time, they won't just come for me. They'll come for you too." The red lights faded. The corridor returning to its pale glow, Sael leaned against the wall. Breathing heavily, Ethan stepped closer. "You need rest," she shook her head. "No, the core is weakening, and now that the sentinels know, they'll try to seize it if they cut my link to it. The station will collapse," he frowned. "So what do we do?" She looked up at him, a strange light in her eyes. "We protected it together." Ethan stared at her for a long moment. He never imagined he'd be fighting with an alien who once imprisoned him. But something inside him had changed. He wasn't just trying to survive anymore. He wanted to understand, maybe even help. Because beneath all her coldness, he could feel that Sael wasn't fighting for power. She was fighting for something she believed in. Something bigger than both of them. They began moving again, deeper into the station, toward the heart of the core as they walked. The walls whispered faintly. The living structure seemed to sense what had happened, its glow shifting between blue and red. Torn between hope and fear, Ethan glanced at Sael. "What happens if they destroy the core?" She hesitated before answering. "Then the truth will die with it." "The truth?" he asked. Sael looked at him, her voice soft but firm. "Yes, human. The truth about why you were brought here, and why the core chose you." Her words lingered like a blade in his mind as they disappeared into the glowing tunnels. And somewhere behind them, in the shadowed corridors of the station, the sentinels gathered again, their eyes burning brighter, their voices whispering one command: eliminate the human. The path to the core was darker than before. The corridors no longer glowed blue but pulsed with red light. Slow and heavy like the heartbeat of a dying creature, Ethan followed close behind Warden Sael, his eyes scanning the twisting walls that seemed to move on their own. The air felt charged, thick with electricity and fear. He could sense that something was waiting for them ahead, something ancient and watching. Sael's steps were quiet but determined. Her armor was cracked from the battle, faint light leaking from beneath the plates. Ethan could tell she was injured, though she refused to slow down. "Are you sure you can keep going?" he asked softly. She gave a small nod, her voice calm but heavy. "The core doesn't have much time. If it fades, the station will die, and every living thing within it will be erased." They turned a corner, and the corridor opened into a massive chamber that seemed to stretch beyond sight. The walls pulsed with veins of light, spiraling toward a giant sphere floating in the center. It was the core, the living heart of the station. It glowed with layers of energy, colors shifting from blue to silver to deep violet. It hummed softly like 1,000 voices whispering together. Ethan stepped closer, his breath catching. "It's beautiful," he murmured. Sale's expression softened for a moment. "It was created long before my kind even existed. It holds the knowledge and memories of countless species, the essence of what we were, and what we could have been." Her voice trembled slightly. "But it's fading now, because we forgot what it meant to protect it." As Ethan reached out toward the core, a surge of warmth spread through his chest. The light flickered, and images flashed before his eyes. Worlds burning, stars collapsing, alien cities turned to dust. He gasped, stepping back. What was that? "The core showed you what it remembers," Sale said quietly. "It feels your mind, it knows your intent. It's deciding if it can trust you." Before Ethan could respond, the chamber trembled violently. A low roar echoed through the walls, followed by a burst of red light from the entrance. The sentinels had found them. Dozens of them stepped through the shadows, their weapons glowing with deadly light. Their leader stood at the front, its voice cold and sharp. "Warden Sale, step away from the core. Your corruption ends here." Sale raised her weapon, her eyes blazing with defiance. "You don't understand. The core is dying. If you destroy it, everything ends." "The core has been poisoned," the sentinel hissed, "and it began when you linked with that human." Ethan clenched his fists. "I didn't ask for this, but if you want to stop her, you'll have to go through me." The sentinels didn't hesitate. They attacked, beams of burning light filling the chamber. Sale threw up a shield, energy bursting around her like shattered glass. Ethan dove behind a pillar, his mind racing. The core pulsed faster now, reacting to the chaos. Its light flickering in pain. Sale was strong. But the sentinels were too many. One beam struck her side, sending her crashing to the floor. She groaned, her hand reaching toward the core. "Ethan," she whispered, "the core must bond with you. Only your link can save it now." He froze. "Bond? What does that mean?" "It means," she said weakly, "you'll have to give it what it needs, your will, your energy, your mind." Ethan's heart pounded. He looked at the core, its light dimming, the hum fading like a dying breath. He could feel its pull calling to him. He ran forward, ignoring the heat of the battle, the air thick with light and smoke. The moment his hand touched the core, everything went silent. The world dissolved into light. Ethan found himself floating in a space of pure energy. Surrounded by swirling colors and voices, he heard echoes. Sale's memories, the cries of her people, the pain of the dying station. Then a voice filled his mind. Soft but powerful. "Human, why do you help us?" Ethan swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "Because I don't want another world to die." The core pulsed brighter, its light wrapping around him like a living flame. "Then show me your truth," it said. Ethan closed his eyes, and for a brief moment he thought of Earth, of the blue sky, the sound of rain, the feeling of home. He thought of every mistake humans made, wars, greed, destruction, but also of love, hope and resilience. He poured it all into the light. Everything that made him human. The core shuddered, then exploded with brilliance in the real world. The sentinels froze as the light consumed the chamber. Their bodies flickered, their weapons dissolving into dust. Sale shielded her eyes, her voice trembling. "Ethan." When the light faded, Ethan was standing at the center of the room, his body surrounded by a faint blue aura. The core floated behind him, glowing stronger than ever. He turned toward Sale, his eyes shining with light. "It worked," he said softly. "I think it's alive again." Sale stared at him, awe and fear mixing in her gaze. "Yes," she whispered, "but at what cost?" Ethan smiled faintly, his voice calm. "Maybe now we'll find out." The chamber was silent after the storm of light. The air shimmered with faint sparks as if the core itself had taken a breath after centuries of holding it in. Ethan stood still, his eyes glowing with the same blue energy that now pulsed through the walls. The core floated behind him, alive and radiant, its hum steady like the beat of a heart rediscovered. Warden Sale watched in silence, her mind struggling to understand what she was seeing. The human she once called a trespasser now carried the same energy as the most sacred creation of her kind. The core had accepted him, bonded with him, and through that bond, the station itself began to heal. Cracks along the walls sealed themselves. The dying lights turned blue again, and the hum spread across the entire structure like a rising wave of life. Ethan turned slowly toward Sale, his voice calm but filled with something deeper than before. It's connected to me now. I can feel its thoughts, its memories. Even its pain. Sale stepped forward carefully, her armor still cracked. The core chose you, Ethan. Do you understand what that means? He shook his head slightly. Not really, but I think it trusted me because I didn't want power. I just wanted to help. Before Sale could answer, the floor trembled violently. The remaining sentinels reappeared, broken but relentless, their glowing eyes flickering red. Their leader, damaged from the blast, pointed its weapon toward Ethan. The core has been corrupted by the human mind, it hissed. We will end this infection now. Ethan raised his hand instinctively, and the air rippled with energy. The core's power flowed through him like fire and light combined. The sentinels opened fire, but the beams curved away. Bending around an invisible shield, Sale watched, awe filling her eyes as Ethan walked forward slowly, each step echoing through the chamber. Stop fighting, Ethan said, his voice carrying a strange resonance, both human and something else. The core doesn't belong to one species. It belongs to every living mind that ever existed here. The sentinels hesitated for a second, their movements uncertain, but their leader roared in defiance and fired again. Ethan lifted both hands, and this time the blast didn't just deflect. It shattered into light that spread through the entire chamber. When the light cleared, the sentinels were gone, dissolved into streams of energy that the core absorbed. The station grew quiet again, a calm unlike any before. Sale walked closer, her voice soft. You've done what even I could not. You've brought balance to the core. Ethan looked at her, exhaustion visible in his eyes. It's not me, Sale, it's us. The core needed both of us, human and Warden. Logic and emotion, reason and heart. For the first time, Sale smiled, a faint but real smile. Maybe you're right, she said. Maybe this was always meant to happen. But then the core pulsed violently again, the light flashing brighter than ever. Ethan winced, clutching his chest. It's calling me. Sale's eyes widened. What do you mean? The connection, Ethan gasped. It's not stable. The core is trying to merge fully. It doesn't want to lose me. The floor shook again, and cracks began to spread across the chamber. The station groaned like a giant awakening from a long sleep. Sale reached for him. You have to break the link, Ethan, or it'll consume you. He shook his head. If I do, it'll collapse again, all your people. Everything here will die. Sale's voice broke slightly. And if you don't, you'll die. Ethan looked at her, really looked. And for the first time, he saw not an alien warden or a captor, but a being who had fought for her world, who had lost everything. He smiled softly. You once said this place needed hope, he whispered. Maybe that's what I was brought here for. Sael's eyes glistened faintly as the core's light grew too bright to look at. She tried to pull him away, but the energy had already wrapped around him like a cocoon. Ethan, she shouted, her voice echoing through the chamber. He looked at her one last time, his voice calm. Tell them, we tried. The core exploded in a wave of light that spread through the station. The tremor stopped, the air grew still, and everything was washed in a soft blue glow. Sale shielded her eyes as the brilliance faded. When she opened them again, the chamber was quiet, peaceful, and the core floated gently in the center, glowing steady and strong, but Ethan was gone. Only a faint shimmer of blue light remained where he had stood. Sale stepped closer, her heart heavy. She could feel the core's hum in her mind now, and within it, a familiar voice, faint but warm. Still here, Ethan whispered through the light. Guess I'm part of the system now. Sale closed her eyes, a small tear sliding down her cheek. You saved us, she said softly. You saved all of us. The station's light began to spread across the stars, reaching distant worlds for the first time in centuries. The core was alive again, connected to everything it had once lost. Sale stood alone in the glowing chamber, looking up at the swirling energy above her. She placed her hand on her chest and whispered, Rest now, human. Your kind has earned its place among the stars, and far beyond the alien world. Deep in the endless dark of space, the stars burned a little brighter, as if the universe itself had taken notice of one small human who refused to give up.